None of these stories are paranormal. And that's exactly why they're terrifying. This happened when I was 19. At the time, I didn't think of it as a terrifying experience. But years later, whenever I'm in a caravan at night and the lights start going off, the memory comes back in full force. My older brother has always lived on instinct. Unfortunately, his instincts are usually terrible. He's great at driving though. Our dad is a mechanic and my brother had been fixing and racing the same type of car since he was young. He never made much money from it, but as long as he had cigarettes, alcohol, and weed he was happy. I never got along with his girlfriends. He had a habit of choosing chaotic people. So when he told me his new girlfriend Chantel was the one, I decided to drive 4 hours north to meet her. I judged her immediately. Platinum blonde hair, long fake nails, always glued to her phone. Conversation with her was awkward and forced. After some pressure from my dad, I agreed to go with them to my brother's race in Scotland. We stayed at a caravan park that was nearly empty since the holiday season was over. It was quiet, dark, and isolated. That night, my brother and Chantel went to a poker night at a nearby pub. I stayed behind alone. About an hour later, Chantel started texting me. Her messages were long, confusing, and came through in the wrong order because of bad signal. Then she suddenly stopped replying. Later I got a call from an unknown number. I ignored it. Then it rang again. I ignored that too. Not long after, I got another text from Chantel asking if I was awake and if my brother had left his car keys in the caravan. She asked which caravan it was. As I replied, I heard footsteps outside. Heavy footsteps. Slow. Careful. Then my phone buzzed again. Let me in. My stomach dropped. The footsteps didn't sound like my brother. They were too heavy, too quiet. I checked her recent messages and noticed something was wrong. The writing style had changed. Shorter. No emojis. I stayed frozen in the dark. Suddenly there were loud bangs and a sharp cracking sound. A security light turned on nearby. Through the peephole, I saw the caravan opposite had been forced open. One man was inside. Another stood by my brother's car. One of them said, "The girl's not here." I didn't think. I ran. I climbed out through the bathroom window, landed in the gravel, and bolted into the woods behind the caravan. I hid there until I heard tires screeching away. I didn't come out until my brother found me. I was alive. And that was enough. At the time this happened, my husband and I lived in a small 2-story house with 2 entrances. One door was at the front of the house, and the other was on the side and led into the laundry room. We usually used the side door to let our dog out at night, but the step down was hard on his hips. So we had started using the front door instead, where the porch was much lower to the ground. One night, around midnight, I was home alone with the dog. Before going to bed, I took him outside one last time. I clipped his leash onto a long line attached to the front of the house, closed the door and locked it. This was something I did every night. While I was in the kitchen putting dishes away, I heard scratching at the front door. That was my dog's signal that he wanted to come back inside. I walked over to the door and out of habit, I looked through the peephole first. Instead of my dog, I saw a man standing on my porch. He wasn't knocking or moving. He was standing very close to the door, staring down at the door handle as if he was studying it. I froze with my hand on the lock. I couldn't hear my dog anywhere. A few seconds later, I heard another scratch on the door. This one was louder. That sound snapped me out of my shock and I rushed to grab my phone. My hands were shaking as I called my husband and tried to explain what I was seeing. He was confused at first, but he said he was on his way home. That's when it hit me. My dog was still outside with this man. I slowly went back to the door and looked again. The man was still there in the exact same position. He hadn't moved at all. I tried to take a photo through the peephole, but the image was too distorted to show anything clearly. Then the man lifted his head. He looked straight at me as if he knew I was watching. His eyes locked onto mine through the glass. He slowly smiled, wide and deliberate, like he was enjoying my fear. After a few seconds, he turned around and walked away down the street. I stayed frozen until my husband came home. When we went outside, we found the end of the dog's line had been cut. Our dog had wandered into a neighbor's yard. Nothing else happened that night, but I never forgot that man standing silently at my door. When I was around 15 years old, I started babysitting for a family who lived near my high school. They had 3 children, 2 boys and a girl. Their mom already knew my family, so she trusted me and the pay was good. I didn't have much babysitting experience, but I agreed. At first, everything seemed fine. The oldest child mostly kept to himself, playing video games or doing homework. The two younger ones were much harder to manage. The daughter was obsessed with horror movies and liked to act them out. More than once, I had to hide the kitchen knives because she wanted to copy scenes she'd seen. The youngest boy was even worse. One day he tried to set the Christmas tree on fire. Whenever the kids got out of control, I would threaten to call their mom. That usually worked. But I noticed something strange. If I mentioned their dad instead, they would immediately stop misbehaving. They didn't argue or laugh. They went quiet. I hadn't met their dad at first. I was told he was very tall and big but still, a nice guy. I didn't think much of it. One evening things got so bad that I actually called him. He said he was leaving work early and would be home soon. When he arrived, I understood why the kids were scared of him. I was only 15 and he was enormous. He had to duck slightly to fit through the doorway. He wasn't rude or aggressive, but his presence alone made me uncomfortable. I felt small and nervous sitting on the couch with him. We talked briefly about schedules. The youngest kids went outside and the oldest stayed inside with us. I noticed the oldest child becoming anxious, making excuses to leave the room. Eventually, I offered to walk to the shop just to break the tension. A few days later, I was told I wouldn't be babysitting anymore. The mom apologized and said plans had changed. I didn't question it. Then everything fell apart. One afternoon, I came home to my mom in tears. She hugged me tightly and asked if anything had ever happened with the children's dad. I was confused and told her no. She explained that the man had been arrested. He had killed someone at work. During questioning, he admitted to abusing his wife, and there were suspicions of other violent acts. Police said his victims were often petite, pale girls with dark hair. That description fit me perfectly. Nothing had happened to me, but the realization of how close I'd come made me feel sick. I stopped babysitting immediately. I still think about that family and how easily things could have gone very differently. This happened over the course of almost a year, and that's what made it so disturbing. It wasn't one single moment. It was a long stretch of small things that slowly added up. I started noticing him in late 2023. He was an older man, probably in his 60s, who walked a golden retriever around my neighborhood. I would see him when I left for work in the morning and again when I came home in the evening. He always wore the same blue jacket. At first, I didn't think much of it. It looked like a windbreaker, the kind someone might wear every day. What stood out was how much he stared. At first, I told myself he was just lonely or socially awkward. We lived in a quiet neighborhood, and people often watched others pass by. Once, I tried to make small talk and asked him if he had received a letter from the homeowners association. He looked genuinely confused, almost startled that I spoke to him at all. He didn't really answer and just kept staring. After that, I started seeing him even more often. Almost every day. Sometimes twice a day. When my husband moved out and took our dog with him, I began spending more time alone at the house. Behind my backyard was a national forest. At night, when I went outside to smoke, I started hearing footsteps in the woods. I told myself it was animals. Raccoons. Possums. Anything but a person. Then things started going missing. Cigarettes. Lighters. I would swear I had left a nearly full pack outside, only to find half of it gone the next morning. I blamed my drinking and my memory. My mom stayed with me for a while and noticed the man too. She thought he might be sick or confused, maybe harmless. But when my cousins came over to help with repairs, they didn't like him at all. He stopped and watched them work. He let his dog wander into the driveway. When they told him to leave, he just stared and slowly walked away. That's when his stare changed. It felt colder. Meaner. One day, I saw him walking toward the forest behind my house and disappearing into the trees. That's when everything clicked. The smells. The timing. The footsteps at night. I started looking into trail cameras. Before I could buy one, new neighbors moved in next door. The very last time I saw the man was the day their moving truck arrived. After that, he was gone. Completely. I stayed in that house until 2025. I never saw him again. But I still believe he was watching me from the woods the entire time. This happened a few days ago in a public forest park in the south of the UK. It's a well-used place with dog walkers, runners, and cyclists, even into the evening. I walk my dog there often and know the paths well, which is why this experience shook me so badly. It was around 5 p.m. just after dusk. There was still some light in the sky, but the forest itself was already dark. I crossed a pedestrian bridge over a motorway and entered a narrow path that curves left and slopes downhill. Tall bushes line both sides, making it hard to see what's ahead, especially in low light. About halfway down, the path dips before rising again. As I started down the slope, my dog suddenly stopped about 15 feet in front of me. She wears a small red light on her collar. When she froze, that light briefly lit up the lowest point of the path. That's when I saw them. A very tall, thin figure was standing directly in the middle of the path, facing me. They were already there waiting. At their feet was an old, torn suitcase standing upright with the handle raised. I hadn't used my torch yet, but there was enough light from the bridge behind me for them to know I was coming. I immediately felt trapped. Turning back meant crossing the open bridge again and moving deeper into the forest. I didn't want to run and start a chase. So I kept walking at a steady pace, pretending I hadn't noticed anything. As I got closer, the figure seemed even taller because of the slope. They were wearing a long dark hooded garment that went all the way to the ground. My heart was racing. I had a strong torch, my dog's heavy metal lead clip, and a metal flask in my bag. My mind was racing through options. When I reached the point where I couldn't avoid them, I snapped my torch straight into their face and moved past them immediately. In a deep, low voice they said, "That's not a good idea." I didn't stop. I ran uphill into the trees off the path. I turned off my torch and my dog's collar light and broke line of sight as fast as I could. I heard movement behind me. Heavy breathing. Sticks snapping. But I wasn't followed out of the woods. I made it home safely. What scared me most was that this person chose a narrow, dark place and waited. I'm not saying anything supernatural happened. I'm just sharing an experience that reminded me to trust my instincts and get out first, without trying to understand someone's intentions in the moment.